Teraz możesz zająć się tym, co naprawdę ważne, bo inne ważne sprawy, jak koszenie trawy, zrobią się same, o każdej porze, niezależnie od pogody. A Ty korzystaj z każdej chwili, ciesz się życiem i doskonale skoszonym trawnikiem. Husqvarna. Roboty koszące Automower. Wejdź na husqvarna.pl i odwiedź dealera.
Historia firmy rozpoczęła się kilkanaście lat temu, kiedy to zaoferowaliśmy naszym klientom pierwsze urządzenia do pielęgnacji ogrodu. Były to kosiarki, podkaszarki, pilarki. W następnych latach poszerzyliśmy naszą ofertę o maszyny specjalistyczne, aeratory, kosiarki wrzecionowe, piaskarki. Jednak maszyny to nie wszystko.
Kolejnym etapem w rozwoju firmy było wprowadzenie specjalistycznych nawozów, nasion traw oraz sprzętu diagnostycznego. Pielęgnacja trawy to nie tylko koszenie, to szereg działań, które wymaga od nas pasji i zaangażowania. To tylko dzięki temu osiągniemy właściwy sukces. Wszystkie nasze działania opieramy na ludziach, na specjalistach, którzy na co dzień pracują na polach golfowych, boiskach i stadionach. To ciężka praca, wymagająca dużego zaangażowania, często 24 godziny na dobę.
To właśnie pasja doprowadziła nas do momentu, w którym mogliśmy uczestniczyć w wydarzeniach takich jak Mistrzostwa Świata i Europy w piłce nożnej w roku 2017 i 2019 oraz w jednym z najważniejszych turniejów golfowych w Polsce Grady Polish Open by Emerald w roku 2020.
Mieliśmy również zaszczyt być partnerem konferencji organizowanej na Zamku Królewskim w Warszawie pod tytułem Autentyzm, ochrona i zarządzanie. Dzisiaj na stałe doradzamy na ogrodach Zamku Królewskiego pod względem właściwej pielęgnacji trawników i ogrodów.
Chcemy dzielić się wiedzą i zarażać pasją kolejne pokolenia greenkeeperów i groundsmenów. Na naszych szkoleniach dla obiektów sportowych, pól golfowych, firm usługowych prezentujemy najnowsze rozwiązania z zakresu pielęgnacji muraw trawiastych. Przeprowadzamy audyty, doradzamy w inwestycjach związanych z budową stadionów piłkarskich i boisk. Każdego dnia poszukujemy odpowiedzi na pytanie, jak właściwie pielęgnować trawnik.
Nasz cel to szmaragdowy kolor, taki jak logo naszej firmy.
Podstawowym budulcem każdego ogrodu jest ziemia. Dlatego nasz spacer po królewskich ogrodach rozpoczniemy od zejścia pod ziemię. To tutaj, 4 metry pod ziemią, rozpoczyna się nasza 12-kilometrowa trasa nawadniająca ogrody. To również stąd sterujemy naszymi fontannami i oświetleniem. To była techniczna strona naszego ogrodu, a teraz wracamy na górę. Rabata kwietna to jedna z naszych największych atrakcji. 4 razy w sezonie zmieniamy jej wygląd, aby zawsze była piękna i świeża. Zabytkowy labirynt grabowy to serce naszego ogrodu. To na nim oparto ideę odtworzenia ogrodów dolnych, gdyż najstarsze drzewa przetrwały działania wojenne. Trawiasty wgłębnik w centralnej części naszego ogrodu to oddech dla kompozycji ogrodów dolnych. Świeża i zielona trawa przyciąga uwagę naszych zwiedzających, a trawnik wygląda świetnie w każdej porze roku. Ogrody zamkowe to także ostoja zwierzyny. Ptaki i drobne zwierzęta futerkowe to nasi stali bywalcy. Obecnie znajdujemy się w Boskiecie Południowym, który nie przetrwał działań wojennych i został w całości odtworzony. Warto tu także zajrzeć przez wzgląd na fantastyczną rzeźbę smoczycy, która od niedawna gości w naszych ogrodach. Królewskie Ogrody to niepowtarzalne miejsce na mapie Warszawy, idealne do odpoczynku i relaksu.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We would like to welcome you in the Royal Castle in Warsaw. Paweł Gut, Sław Krzeski and Monika Drąg. We would like to invite you to webinar 4 seasons of the year in the gardens. For the next 12 months, we are going to resume our meetings. We are going to host you in the inners of Warsaw Royal Castle gardens. According to the seasons, today we are in the Royal Library. We are going to visit with you very many gardens in Europe, discover the mysteries, beautiful. Each month, every Wednesday, first Wednesday of the month, you will see the possibility to see Tulipomania, magic and in Europe. This is the PhD Dariusz Sobecki. He is the lecturer of the Warsaw University of Life Sciences, and he knows quite a lot about tulips and tulip agalia and other. And we have also special guests who are going to prepare for you a very special surprises. The duo Łukasz Marcinkowski i Ragnet flowers and honey are going to give you the floristic styles with various epochs. And since the gardens, it's not only colors and shapes, but also taste and smells, we are going to have the journalist, Mr. Roberto Makłowicz, with us. We are going to hand the floor over to our speaker. We would like to invite you to the lecture. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you very sincerely, all the fans of the Royal Castle in Warsaw and the Royal Gardens and all the gardens whatsoever, and fans and fascinates of enthusiasm of today's hero, that is the tulip. I would like to tell you about tulips, about Tulipomania, about the magic of Europe and the fever of Europe. And I will talk about what has happened in the Netherlands over the tulipan fever. But more time I would like to spend to what is going on at the moment and why do tulips are so fascinating, what is so interesting in them. And I am going to start from the fact that how does the natural cycle of tulip looks like, because we know that tulips blossom in April, May, in spring, obviously depending on the cultivar. But the blossoming is in spring. For this blossoming to be effective and to have these blossoming tulips in spring, we have to plant the bulbs in autumn. Obviously, the tulip is the bulb plant, and there is some phenomenon in this bulb, the fact that inside of the tulip bulb there is in autumn, when we plant these bulbs in September, October, there is created miniature of the flower. I would like to show it to you because I have it with me. A little bit of tulip bulbs, and we do not have the time to cut these bulbs precisely. I have prepared something for you which is already cut half, so who does not know, you can see with your own eyes that if in autumn you cut through the bulb of the tulip, inside you can see the shape of the miniature of the flower. This is a phenomenon, physiological phenomenon, that very much in advance, before we see this flower in spring, in autumn we have fully formed mini flower. You can see the leaves, the flakes, and all the flower that you can see here. And you can tell you why we can see it at the moment. Now it's the time for planting the bulbs, but inside you've got this miniature of the flower, and only the bulb which will plant it down into the ground and cool it down, which will get appropriate cooling, can blossom. And this phenomenon of the fact that inside of the bulb, much before, because in fact, if we were to count it, sometimes it is even 6 months in advance, you can get this formulating the flowers. And the last stadium of this, so this is G stage. I am going to show it to you on the picture because at the moment I have no time nor possibility to show this bulb for you, but you can see it in the picture. I did it having more time. I took a photo of it, and in the bottom right picture you can see the pistil. So this is the last stage of the miniature of flower. So this is the G stage. So this is the visible pistil. You can see the flakes, the leaves, and it is waiting for spring, for the temperature to rise, to blossom, and to make us admire it with its beauty. So this is a phenomenon that is fascinating in tulips. That with one bulb which is planted in autumn, we get this flower, and this miniature is in autumn. Obviously, we associate tulips with the Netherlands. This is indubitable because they became the symbol of the Netherlands and is famous for it. But when we talk about, and when I sometimes ask students, where do tulips come from? Obviously, the first association is the Netherlands, and it's okay, it's right. But the Netherlands, and this is the second motherland of human. The Middle Asia is the first motherland. So in the wild positions you can get in China, Iran. So there is a center of biodiversity. You can get in the Hindu Kushu Pamiru mountains in the steppe of Kazakhstan. So this is the area where it comes from, and this is only where it came from, and they were disseminated all over the world. Because we know that the wild cultivars of tulips, so this is Tulipa sylvestris, so this is common tulip, which also can be seen in southern Europe, and sometimes it is even said that there were parts of it found in the Tatra mountains and in the Silesia. Nevertheless, probably, so with a big likelihood, you can get the tulips which were dragged. So this is not a natural position where they grow. All over the world, there are about 120 variety species of tulips, but there are thousands of cultivars. So this is 100 and 120 of cultivars, but they are registered in various countries, breeded thousands of cultivars of tulips. So this huge number of cultivars of tulips made the situation that it was necessary to create a horticular classification. I'm going to show it to you in a minute, but I would like to draw your attention to the fact that there is a very big variety in the tulips. The size is from 10 to 70 centimeters. The blossoming, we just associate tulips with May, but they start blossoming as early as April. Some species and botanic cultivars with good weather can blossom even in March. There is a very big variety when we talk about the shape, the leaves, and the shape of the flower, because I am going to show it to you in a minute in one of the slides, because they distinguish, there are 26 different types of flower. Obviously, the most popular, this is the single tulip with 6 flakes, but there are various, and I am going to show them to you in a minute. There are various colors. And we were looking for a tulip with a black color, and it's always very interesting and very fascinating. And there is not a blue one, but some kind of violet ones which are going towards the blue color. They are just quite close to it. But with this international classification, horticultural classification of the tulips, which is common, there are 15 different groups. They are single early, full early tulips. You can see that full early tulips were breeded in 1665. And parrot tulips, which are also very attractive, were created 25 years later, in 1690. So these were first cultivars of parrot tulips. It's really stunning. So you can see here that there are 26 distinguished types of shape of the flower of the tulip. So it really is quite impressive. And I would like to show you in the pictures a little bit of these tulips from all over different groups. There's botanic tulips, so wild cultivars, which you can see in natural situations in Middle Asia. Tulipa ruensis, Tulipa vitali. So here subsequent wild cultivars, and the ones which were breeded and they come from wild cultivars. Here you can see on the right, on the top, you can see the parrot cultivar. So this is fully blossoming part. So at the first glance, it does not resemble tulip, a classical tulip. But this is something that also creates some kind of fascination of these flowers. So here you have full flower cultivars, and also fringed and fried flowers. West Point, this is the this is the lily flowered tulip. So this is a tulip which is narrowing flakes, and they are back a little bit. So they resemble lilies. So this is why they were called lily flowered tulips. Once I tell you how these tulips got to their second motherland, the Netherlands. Now I just would like to tell you that this type of flowers, so the lily flowered tulips, mostly red ones, were cultivated in the Ottoman Empire, and from where they came to Europe and finally to the Netherlands. So here in the Ottoman Empire, so in the territory of current Iran and Turkey, they were grown as they've been grown starting from the 11th century in the gardens of at that territory. Those days, a tulip was a symbol of Ottoman Empire. This is the tulip era during the Ahmed III Sultan. This is the 18th century. So you can see that it is even after the Netherlands and European Tulipomania that we are going to talk a little bit later. This tulip in the empire, this was the inspiration for everyday life, culture, art. So tulips were used for the ornamenting clothes, pots. There were tulip holidays, celebrations, and this route of tulips to Europe There are a few histories. We really don't know what was the true one, but probably the bulbs of tulips from the Ottoman Empire got to Europe by various roads, but the most popular history and most documented one and most disseminated says that the first tulip bulbs came to Europe thanks to the ambassador of the Caesar Frederick I and the Suleiman the Great. He saw it in Istanbul, and it was in 1554. And the first bulbs of tulips were brought from there. They were planted in the Caesar garden in Vienna, but they were looked after by Karol Clusius, who was and since he was the dawn of the and the later the university, he took the bulbs of the tulips to the Netherlands. And on the other hand, we know that the first description of the flowers of the tulips was made by Konrad Gessner, who was a Swiss doctor and botanic scientist, and he was admiring it in Augsburg in 1559 in Augsburg. So it is the proof that these tulips were getting into Europe via many different ways. The name of tulip is quite an interesting name. The name comes from the tulben, dulband or tulpana, and in fact they mean turban. Probably it was some kind of the effect of the mistake, word mistake, because they asked what is the thing that is wearing on the head one of the Ottoman Empire, and somebody said he had one tulip over there, and he said that he's got a turban on the head, but in fact turban is tulip, the red one, lily flowered one. This is lalech, so a completely different name in Turkish, but for the first time it was used, this tulip name, referring to the tulip and with reference to this flower, and it was done by the Dutch. To commemorate this botanic scientist, Karol Clusius, who planted first bulbs of tulips in the Netherlands in Leida. One of the wild tulips was named after him, and in the picture you can see this is Tulip Clusian, so the Clusius tulip, and his brass. In the Netherlands, quite soon we could see the tulip fever. Obviously this is a known history because the economists were talking about it and examining it, this exceptional phenomenon which took place in the Netherlands in the first half of the 17th century. So the peak of this tulipan fever, when tulips were purchased, interesting cultivars of tulips of very high prices. The peak was in 1634-37, but then unfortunately there was a crash because there were some exchange speculations. The prices went up so much that nobody was able to pay as high prices as they wanted. From one day to another, we had a problem of people when going bankrupt, and you can imagine how it happened. If for one bulb of tulip that you can see here, this is a hero of this tulipan theater in the Netherlands, Semper Augustus. Semper Augustus cultivar with the potted flowers. In the top moment of Tulipomania, for one bulb of this tulip, the price was, one sources say 3, others I said 13,000 of florins, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that per one bulb of tulip of this cultivar, you could at that time purchase a house in the center of Amsterdam, over the channel, over the main channel in Amsterdam, so in the prestigious location. So this as much as one bulb was worth. So here you had one other calculation. So today per one, this is $90,000. So you can calculate it in a various ways, but you could say that this was a crazy, and today we know it. We know that the Semper Augustus and the spottiness of this, in fact, it was actually virus infection, but at that time nobody knew about it. Later on, it will find out that after hundreds of years, we found out that it was due to virus, tulip-breaking virus. This is the most dangerous virus which you can infect tulips in Poland and all over the world. In the pictures you can see the examples. They look beautifully, but unfortunately this disease, the virus disease, this is the virus infection, causes quite a lot of damages. There is less crop of bulbs, there is degeneration of the whole cultivar, and it is quite harmful. But the flowers look really interesting. Everybody likes this pottiness. These tulip fascinations covered not only the Netherlands, but never did they achieve such a peak like in the Netherlands, and they have never got as much prices. But in the 20s of the 19th century in England, with some potted cars, for instance, Fanny Campbell from the Bizarre cultivar, it was from 72 to 100 pounds for one single bulb, so it was quite a lot. And then the Dutch, after this crash, they shake up and they came to the market balance, and the interest in the tulips continued in all the countries of Europe. Slowly it started increase in the Netherlands. In the 19th century, the Dutch started to cultivate the tulips in the mass scale. Obviously, at that time, the price dropped down, so the tulips became more and more popular. So they started to intensify the production, they started to promote tulips. There was quite a lot of supply and good price. Decided that at the beginning of the 20th century, the interest in the tulips in Europe and in the US was growing very much. And so the import of Netherlands to the States, it was 54 million pieces, and then 106 and 153 millions of bulbs in the 30s. The heading of tulips, because this is quite a specific in the plantation of tulips to get good bulbs of good quality on these plantations where we don't care about flowers but the bulbs. We are deheading the tulips, but then we don't need it, because what we care for is we leave the stem, we leave the leaves to get the photosynthesis going on, so that these bulbs are as good as possible to have the best harvesting. In the Netherlands, in Poland, in the 18th century, then in the magnet gardens, and then we had to wait a little bit until the 1939 when in Warsaw Botanic Garden. There was a prelection about the gardening. Then 3 years later in the Warsaw University of Life Sciences, Professor Wójcicki started, and 2 years later immigrants from the Netherlands started the first production plantation in Górsk over Vistula River. Then after the war, there's plantations in Puławy, which were established by Dąbrowski family, and in 35 this was the first breeding work. So here there are a few breeds which were crossed, and they were popular in the 70s or 80s of the 20th century. So one was called by the Professor Wójcicki's name. All over the world in the ornamental horticulture, we have in the Netherlands, they are the leader of the production, but apart from that, we also in Japan 250 hectares, in France 300, in Germany 200, in the States 200, in Poland about 300 hectares. We can say the Netherlands and then the rest of the world, but we can say that we have the plantation in Poland, and they put us in the world's top countries, obviously excluding the Netherlands. So this was a picture to show how they are beheaded. And apart from that, there are new countries coming up, because until now they were cultivated in the north part of the earth. Now in the south, so Chile, South Africa, New Zealand. And the point is that the tulips, as I say, for this mini flower which is in this bulb to grow, they have to be cooled down. So if you have them in the south, you have to have the altitude ensuring cooling period so that they get below 9 degrees centigrade. Here I am just shortening because I just said 300 hectares in Poland. So here you can see other data from the bulb plants. So the time is flying. So I just would like to show you how the plantations look like in Poland. So here you have in Żuławy, Wielkopolska and Mazowsze. So here this is only 300 hectares. However, in the Netherlands and all over the world, there is a lot produced for the cut flower. In 2014, on the Dutch flower exchange, got the price of 2 billion units. But in Poland there is quite a lot purchased, so they are forced. So this is the question is, why do we have the here in life on the 7th of October blossoming tulips? Because they were used by forcing method, so accelerating method. So probably in October the ones are from the bulbs from the New Zealand, so from the south, so or from the south of France. We do not have time discuss these issues, but maybe there will be time to talk about it as well. Nevertheless, these are flowers which are used by a forcing method. It is estimated that in Poland we produce even 150-180 million flowers, mainly from the bulbs which are from the Netherlands. Because these 300 hectares are not sufficient for such a big production. But we have good production for the Netherlands. And when we talk about the Netherlands, again, we would like to show you two biggest tulip attractions, contemporary ones. In Keukenhof, this is the bulb park, and obviously the spring parade of flowers. But I would like to show you a few pictures from this fantastic park, which you can see in spring a few months, and you can admire tulips and other bulb plants, because here in the picture you've got both tulips and quite a lot of ones which are over the tulips in some arrangements. Here you can see just the tulips. So here you have to draw attention to the fact that the Katenhof Park also in the same part they just do new planting of the bulbs all the time. There is new topics which is just Kakenhof thing. In 2012 Poland had the privilege of being invited as a topic, the leading topic of this Kakenhof exposure. This is Poland, Heart of Europe. This was the topic, and then from the bulbs there were this mosaic from with the image of Chopin. So this was done for Poland, and we buy a lot of bulbs from the Netherlands. And now I just would like to show you the film which was prepared especially for today, and we would like to show you how this looks like, what is prepared for Kakenhof for the same season. And once you if you want to go next year in spring, you can just see how it looks like in tulips and other bulb plants.
Keukenhof geeft je een kijkje achter de schermen. In het laatste filmpje hebben jullie gezien dat we begonnen met rooien, maar wat doen we eigenlijk de rest van het jaar? We maken nieuwe tekeningen, die moeten uitgezet worden. We doen grondbewerking, we gaan weer snoeien, er is gewoon totaal onderhoud en daar gaan we een paar dingen van laten zien. Als ik ga beginnen met de nieuwe ontwerpen voor komend jaar, dan ga ik even naar die plek om te kijken wat zichtlijnen zijn, waar bomen staan, gewoon hoe het gebied voelt, hoe het oogt. En dan ga ik met mijn tekentafel erheen. En dan ga ik naar kantoor en dan werk ik alles uit. Als ik op de computer klaar ben met intekenen, dan ga ik naar de inzender. Ik wil graag van de inzender weten welke kleuren die hebt, welk assortiment, welke tulpen of hyacinten of narcissen die je graag wil laten zien. Dan gaan we het samen een beetje invullen. En dan zien we van het voorjaar wel wat het geworden is. We zijn hier aan het uitzetten. Op tafel daarachter ligt de tekening. Dat meten we met een liniaal. En dan zetten we het in het groot uit met meetlinten. Dan zetten we stokjes op de maten. Daarna stoten we de randjes op. En dan krijg je een prachtig beeld.
Ik ben een van de tuinmannen die het uitzetwerk doet. Ik vind het erg leuk werk. Het is ook wel een beetje werk waarbij je je eigen je inzicht moet gebruiken met het tekenen van de lijnen, dat ze mooi recht zijn of juist een mooie boog is. Dat vind ik erg leuk om te doen.
Keukenhof 2020. De laatste dag. Het was een bijzonder seizoen. Dit jaar kon u niet bij ons zijn. Maar gelukkig was u virtueel bezoeker in ons park. Wij brachten dit jaar 7 miljoen bloembollen bij u thuis. Het mooiste lentepark ter wereld. Maar voor Keukenhof is nu de lente voorbij. We staan hier tussen de laatste bloeiende tulpen, maar de meeste zijn uitgebloeid. En wij zijn begonnen met rooien. Samen met u hebben wij dit jaar Keukenhof virtueel beleefd. Met alle medewerkers hebben we geprobeerd de Hollandse bloemenpracht bij u thuis te brengen. Wij zien u graag in 2021. En dan weer gewoon in Keukenhof. Voor de mooiste Keukenhof ooit.
We invite you to Keukenhof next year, but at the same time, for a moment in Holland, I will show you a little bit of what the spring parade of flowers look like. And this pertains to not only tulips, but other bulb flowers. Moreover, it's organized each year where there is full blooming of tulips, and the flower parade, the convoy of several flower platforms in the parade, which are arranged from live flower petals and various compositions and arrangements, structures, and as you can see here in the photos, this parade of beautiful, gorgeous platforms with from on the coast Noordwijk to the Haarlem city, where in the town square these platforms are set up, and all weekend they can be admired and watched. And of course it passes next to the Keukenhof Park. And the guests of the park at that time come out into the streets and observe and admire these fantastic creations based on styrofoam structures and petals, but not only always tulips. Sometimes there are hyacinths and also tulips that are used for that. Certain attractions which worldwide, except for the Netherlands and Europe, accompany this fascination with tulips. I would like to give you 2 examples outside of Europe, in Asia. It's South Korea, and the tulip festival, Korean Tulip Festival. It looks fantastic, especially if we look at a kind of flower carpet, a mosaic of huge proportions in this park. This is more of a specific, particular style for Korea. It's very, very colorful, and that is the way it should be. This is one of the more interesting aspects of showing these flowers. See how many different mosaics arranged of planted tulips, and this diversity of colors, of hues, which is so typical for Asia. And also the Japanese love tulips. The Dutch also one of the yellow cultivars, very popular. It's 120 are in production. From the 100 to 120, there is a yellow cultivar which is called Yokohama, which was also very popular until recently in Poland. And thanks to celebrating the Japanese and Japan, one of these tulip parks is Tonami Tulip Park in Japan. It has beautiful tulip arrangements, and giving names to the cultivars is a separate subject matter, a separate story. For now, I would just like to signal to you that this cultivar, which is in honor of the Japanese, who purchase a lot of bulbs from Holland and the Yokohama, and there are also other famous. We have a George W. Bush tulip, but we also have some leaning towards Polish, important, either historical or modern, and the Maria Kaczyńska cultivar, and which the Dutch embassy of the Kingdom of Holland offered to name this, because they also have their ceremonies of naming ceremonies for tulips, which is called a baptism, but the tulips are then covered with champagne, and the breeder is present at such a ceremony, and those names are awarded a little bit. It's a little bit of politics, a little bit of diplomacy, a bit of courtesy, but we're very pleased because it's pleasant to know that there is a tulip that's called Chopin's Preludium, that there's Irena Szedlerova, that there's Maria Kaczyńska tulip. We know that there's a Nicholas Copernicus tulip, and it's pleasant to know that. All the cultivars that I mentioned, they have names in Polish of Polish individuals or historical individuals, but they are cultivars which are bred in Holland. Another cultivar, Józef Piłsudski, also Dutch. However, you know that, ladies and gentlemen, there's a new breeding also, or cultivation of new cultivars, and continues. I'll come back to that in a moment. Tulips are also other different tulip events. Since 2009, we have International Igrzysko Wielkie, International Tulip Fair. Year to year, this event brings in over 40,000 participants in this long May weekend. Tulipans are also on flower beds, and you have examples how you can arrange flower beds, spring flower beds. All you need to remember is that those bulbs have to be planted in the fall, in the autumn, and they need to be set there. It's also excellent material for florists, but here I will not take the floor from Kwiaty and Miód, but I would just like to show you one example here of tulips arranged by Karolina Ładarzyńska and Magdalena Birula-Białnicka in the exhibit of tulips in Wilanów Palace. The tulip exhibitions are arranged in worldwide and around the world. One of the expositions of tulips happens in Skierniewice, and secretly since 2009 there is an annual tulip exhibit in Jan III Sobieski in Wilanów Palace, with the cooperation and the organization and supply by the Association of the Manufacturers of Ornamental Bulb Plants. At that time, the director of kindergarten 146 in Warsaw, she was envious of that, and the association assists in organizing this exhibition in one of the Polish kindergartens. Look how beautiful artwork made by kids accompanying the tulips, and from young from a young age they are fascinated by tulips. I will also like to show you an interesting example because there are new cultivars that are showing up. As I mentioned, there are thousands, but we still have something new. There are very interesting new and interesting cultivars, which on the one hand, as you can see on the left side, the artichoke tulip. So it's an artichoke, and it's kind of reminds you of an artichoke, a little bit of the flower, curcuma flower, but it's something outstanding, extraordinary, and it's stands away from a classic tulip flower. But if you can just notice what breeders can create as new. And the right side, the elegant crown, these are tulips which created a necessity of new tulip groups also in the horticultural classification. We don't have this group because I think it was created 2 years ago, I believe, by the Dutch association, an institution which registers different cultivars from the world, but they announced that they need to a coronet group to indicate and identify and separate with such a shape. So concluding, because time is running up, tulips, the royal castle in Warsaw has also become fascinated with tulips. When the royal gardens were created, then first the tulips made it to the upper garden, to the flower beds of the castle gardens, and they made it there in a very particular way. For agro-technical reasons, we can't, in the gardens of the royal garden, plant them directly in the soil in the fall. Miss Monica said that I assisted in this. She insisted, so I need to boast a little bit. But we came up with an idea of forcing tulips, which I mentioned, this method of forcing and obtaining blooming tulips in another period than the natural cycle, that they bloom in the spring. Of course, we want them to bloom in the castle and the castle gardens in the spring, but we can force them a little bit earlier, and then in the phase when they slowly start to bloom and have the decorative effect, which is very important in a kind of prestigious garden as the royal gardens in Warsaw, royal castle gardens. Another factor is that the royal castle in Warsaw has its own cultivar of, it's been bred by Roman Szymański from Poznań. It's a beautiful, dark, deep red from the Crispa type, and you can see this in the photo. Last year in the Royal Garden, we had the baptism of the new cultivar of the tulip. It's called the Heart of Warsaw. It's also planted in the gardens of the royal castle, and you can see it once again in spring of next year. Since this is a new cultivar and it doesn't have many bulbs yet, the number of bulbs is limited. We are assisting the royal castle in Warsaw and in the Warsaw University of Life Sciences preliminary research on in vitro multiplication of the tulip. We want to do some additional research and to have more genetic material and more bulbs. So a modern involvement of new techniques to assist a new cultivar of which we do not have many bulbs on the market yet. This is all which I've prepared for you today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you've become a little bit more fascinated with tulips, because this is truly a beautiful, beautiful plant and flower, and very interesting, fascinating stories tied to this flower. You just have to remember to plant it in the fall so that in the spring in the garden your eyes can be pleased with the array of colors and this fascinating flower. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you sincerely to our excellent speaker. During the lecture we watched the material prepared by Mrs. Marley Goldenberg, a friendly Kokenhof Gardens, friendly friends of the Royal Castle and the Royal Gardens. And next we have Kwiaty and Miód, flower arrangements.
Welcome. My name is Łukasz and my name is Radek. And together we create the duo Flowers and Honey, Kwiaty i Mód. 7 years ago we started a flower shop in Poznań, and today we've got our ecological farming where we have the flowers, everything that is and the scenography is from the flowers from our growing. We are in favor of naturalistic compositions. So today these tulips, which are a little bit different. This is forced flower. Now we prefer them to have them in spring because they are the strongest and the most beautiful ones. And we think that we often use these French tulips, which are very long. They are nearly 70 centimeters long because if you use them to have some bouquets. And Łukasz is going to set a bouquet, and we would like to, since we talk about Tulipomania, so from the very beginning, when we have the ornamental plants, this composition from tulips, but we are in autumn, and in autumn we can buy tulips which are forced. We have a few pieces, 2 color ones, but generally speaking all the composition is based on dahlia flowers. We have a lot of them in the field. They are very interesting, and they are very seasonal flowers, which at the moment in spring there are loads of them, and they are the biggest part of them. So I think that maybe we can start from just saying that statement that the flowers accompanied people from the very beginning, since they were born until they die. They are some kind of a closed cycle, if you like, the one which contacts us with the death a little bit. It reminds us that everything passes, and in the golden age of the Netherlands, all the artists in the their art, they just painting, they sometimes were as expensive as 1 bulb. So there was the 5,000 golden, and the bulb cost about 4,000 golden. So it was easier to purchase a picture than a tulip at those days. And since we grow our flowers ourselves, we also notice that phenomenon of the tulip, in a sense that when we see it in the field, we see how it grows and how strong it is. And it is quite surprising flower, because we have to remember that in 1612 not only tulip were brought, but also narcissus, hyacinths, iris were before known before due to the fact that they were used as a medical plant. And this phenomenon we don't really know for us, because tulip for us is not as surprising flower as it could seem, but the point is that I am just thinking whether at those days, in the era of golden time of Netherlands, was it about to get richer as quickly as possible, or was it about the beauty of the flower? Because I know that tulips, the bulbs, were most of all at the very beginning brought by the connoisseurs, and they were interesting to very rich people, the artists, because the flowers were some type of social status. It they showed our affluency. Looking at today's to the contemporary days, flowers are very cheap. They are at the reach out of the hand, and we are just thinking, is it really good or not? Whether this flower industry, which in our opinion deprives us of this magic and this unavailability. Obviously, we want the flowers to be available to everybody. So it was connected with that time when the tulips were painted, shown on botanic illustrations. So this madness which we have to come up with some new cultivars all the time, is it the same as it was at that time? We know that Esanuer Smerz in 1612 until 1647, so at the moment when we had this fever, tulip fever, issued a catalogue of plants in which it showed tulips, narcissus, and hyacinths. These graphics were sold with the tulip to the people who could not afford it, and they wanted to have just the little bit of the feeling of this phenomenon plant. On many pictures you could see the pictures which are opening up, which are over-blossomed, and they are so strongly opened that we've got the impressions as if these flakes were to fall out of these flowers. So we just love flowers at a different stage, because it just shows the cycle of life. Maybe Łukasz, you can show in spring we use tulips a lot in the flower shop or in different ones, but since unfortunately the tulips are designed in such a way that they don't open up, and we help them a little bit, and this is what Radek was talking about. Today flowers were a little bit different. So when you sell flowers, so when they are in cool position, then in the market, and then on the gardener, and then we got into the home, we've got the impression that you need to get them fresh. They don't open up, they are just slim, closed all the time, and I don't like tulip which is called strong gold, yellow ones. It's completely closed and it never opens up. And for it to look nice, like in the Netherlands paintings, you need to open up these flowers. So at the very, you have to press them from the top, and in a minute you have one as the one which is nearly dying open tulip. from the Netherlands pictures. Oh, this is how it looks like. You can tell the difference. For me, this is a big better. It looks better than in the like the pistil and also the strands. I think this is quite encouraging. Obviously, Tulipomania was some kind of a fever or madness of merry historians, and it just says that this was some kind of a madness where people wanted to pledge a lot of money, put a lot of money compared to the bulb, and in fact, I don't know, I'm just thinking, was it to show the social status that these people, it is difficult to say because we don't want to speculate. We didn't live in those days, but we know very well that buying pictures with flowers, presenting flowers, was a symbol of social status. Today we buy a good car. At those days we used to purchase a good, nice painting with the flowers. We know that tulips came from the Ottoman Empire. At that time, the tulips which were there looked differently to the ones from Europe, demanded in Europe. It was the tulips with the flakes which were very sharp, which were like needle, very beautiful, long, slim ones. In Topke Palace in Istanbul, every spring there was a huge tulip festival where we could see these tulips in this pyramid wooden constructions, and it is written that in the evening it was lit by mirror lanterns which were brought on the top of the tortoise, and it was quite a big fantasy. So this is the similar period of the Tulipomania in the Netherlands. The point is that in the whole period they came up with 2,000 cultivars, but unfortunately after 1730, so at the time when in Europe the emotions connected with the tulip bulbs went down, they stopped growing these flowers. And we are coming back to the question which we ask ourselves all the time regarding the flowers. Whether the industry which is created, in which unfortunately it is a very big, huge industry, you make quite a lot of money on it. Is it really ethical for us? Because we know that this is more chemistry in it, and here there is a question: is it worth it to pollute our Mother Earth to appreciate these flowers? So for some time we obviously have ecological growing. We know how much work it is, and we know that in big industrial productions it is impossible. For the time being, flowers all over the world, there is a very big fashion or trend, if you like, in which you grow flowers biologically. We know that when you have the production for cut flower, this is so-called biological protection of flowers, which we are happy about it because this is how it is thought. But this is due to the fact that some of the pests don't react to chemicals. because they are resistant to this chemical treatment. I've been dealing with flowers for 20 years. When I started secondary school, I went to the flower shop I wanted to see how to make compositions. In the meantime, I graduated from universities, and we opened up our flower shop. And the more there were quite a lot of questions which were difficult to answer. We were overwhelmed by flowers, but on the other hand, there were more and more questions, and at that point, we go to the direction that we want to cultivate and grow flowers biologically, and think about the Mother Earth, not to add more chemicals, in fact, which is used for cut flowers. I am just comparing working with flower with running a restaurant. This is similar to a restaurant. Robert Makłowicz will tell you a few words about it. And what we like is to work on good quality products, 10 minutes work. Thank you very much for your attention, and we would like to invite you in 1 month's time to our farm. So, flowers and honey, kwiaty i miód. And in a minute, we'll have the guests from Krakow, so the royal city Krakow, Robert Makłowicz. Ladies and gentlemen, why tulip is directly connected with the Netherlands, and the Netherlands with the tulip? Why is it this flower which is the symbol of this place in the world? And why Italy or Spain or France are not famous for tulips? To answer this question, you need to get to the history. It was mentioned both the first speaker and then the gentleman mentioned about the Tulipomania and about this high fever, speculation fever, which covered Holland in 1637. And why did it happen? And why it was the Dutch that were famous for growing tulips? This is the history and religious tradition. The Dutch, these were the ones. This was this part of the Netherlands, which was against Habsburg, Spanish Habsburg, and almost they switched into the Protestant religion. And in the Protestant religion, so they treated this religion very seriously. And what was Reformation? To the principles of this religion, the new one, or this part of the former religion, because I don't want to go into theological disputes, they were treating it very seriously. And what does Protestantism said? According to it, it must you must not enjoy life too much. So a Protestant had to go richer, but accumulate this money for future generations. Getting richer was a privilege, was a good fortune, but spending money for current contemporary goods was a sin. So not unlike French, which stuck to the Roman Catholics, or Italian Roman Catholics, a rich citizen of the Netherlands couldn't put too much on the table to have too much food, couldn't indulge in himself eating and drinking. He couldn't dress up because it was a sin. You can see the differences today between two fragments of former Netherlands, between today's Netherlands, so the part which was against the Habsburg domination and switching to Protestantism, and this Belgium part, so the Flamand Belgium. So it was one nation, the Belgium, which stayed with the Habsburg and stayed with the Catholics. In today's Netherlands, the cuisine is not much. In Belgium, after a week, you put on it's the origins, but which one is richer? The Netherlands. This is because it comes from the history. And showing this richness, which couldn't be shown by dressing and food and drinking, there was one exception. The exception was the garden, because they thought that the garden, this is the emanation of the god. So if you plant flowers, you praise the god. So people started to emphasize their richness, because this is the domain of the people. They want to emphasize that they are richer than others, and they started to emphasize their status by cultivating flowers and planting tulips. From this conclusion, there is one more conclusion from it. The conclusion which tells us what Tulipomania was. So what is this problem from the 1637, the 3rd of February? Some of historians compare it to the Wall Street crash, obviously in the micro scale, because the crash on Wall Street shook the world, but here it just shook the Netherlands. But the latest research show that building the picture of this Tulipomania and the crash, we were using only the 19th century sources, but it was not so bad as these sources showed. This crisis, according to the latest research, was touching only some people. The Dutch were very practical, and they concluded compromises between the debtors and the creditors. The debts were redeemed, there were some compensations paid out, and what most important, this crisis, obviously some people went bankrupt, but there was no recession in the economy, in the Dutch economy. It was very spectacular, but there was no recession. And what is Wall Street? Wall Street is associated with recession. The Dutch in its history had one more element which was quite sad, connected with the tulips. Apart from this Tulipomania, I think that the time of occupation and back in winter 45 to 45 were forced to eat tulip bulbs. They were forced because tulip is non-edible plant. Obviously, theoretically, you can eat the flakes, but they are not tasty. But the bulbs has got toxical alkaloids and very components of glycosyl. I don't know how they taste, but they are very unhealthy and poisonous. Obviously, appropriate thermal treatment allows removing it, but it means that the bulbs of the tulips are absolutely ugly in taste. So, from the cuisine point of view, the Dutch would do much better if years ago they decided they didn't not go for tulips but for lilies, because the onions of lilies not only edible but also in taste they are very good, and we don't realize they are available even in nearly each shop in Poland with Asian food, dried lily bulbs. And if they decided to go for asters families because they have not only such a beautiful flowers like dahlia of asters, from which the family takes the name from, but they have the representatives of a chicory, endivia, dandelion, salads, iceberg lettuce, Maslow's lettuce, roasted or Roman salad, but also like endemic, like for instance the something which is very unusual salad, which is only in Krakow area, breeded in Krakow area. So here we have Canadian goldenrod. Then they would have honey. They could cultivate stevia. Then they would have the sweetness, which is not putting up so much weight like from beetroot or from the canvas. And they could get from Scorzonera, Hispanica. So the roots from the aster ones, which are edible and with big pleasure, but the Dutch didn't go against the Spanish Habsburg to cultivate Scorzonera. So that is why the Netherlands is famous for tulips, and let's not history force the Dutch to eat the tulips. Thank you very much. We are going to finish our meeting today. We would like to thank you very much for having this evening with us. Let's meet at the next webinar on the 4th of November at 6 p.m. So we promise that next time there will be no technical problems. We would like to invite you to see the materials of this cycle, and these films we are going to be issued just after we finish this translation. Thank you very much, and we would like also to invite you to visit Royal Gardens. Goodbye.
Teraz
Good
możesz
night.
zająć się tym, co naprawdę ważne, bo inne ważne sprawy, jak koszenie trawy, zrobią się same, o każdej porze, niezależnie od pogody. A ty korzystaj z każdej chwili, ciesz się życiem i doskonale skoszonym trawnikiem. Husqvarna. Roboty koszące Automower. Wejdź na husqvarna.pl i odwiedź dealera.
Historia firmy rozpoczęła się kilkanaście lat temu, kiedy to zaoferowaliśmy naszym klientom pierwsze urządzenia do pielęgnacji ogrodu. Były to kosiarki, podkaszarki, pilarki. W następnych latach poszerzyliśmy naszą ofertę o maszyny specjalistyczne, aeratory, kosiarki wrzecionowe, piaskarki. Jednak maszyny to nie wszystko.
Kolejnym etapem w rozwoju firmy było wprowadzenie specjalistycznych nawozów, nasion traw oraz sprzętu diagnostycznego. Pielęgnacja trawy to nie tylko koszenie, to szereg działań, które wymaga od nas pasji i zaangażowania. To tylko dzięki temu osiągniemy właściwy sukces. Wszystkie nasze działania opieramy na ludziach, na specjalistach, którzy na co dzień pracują na polach golfowych, boiskach i stadionach. To ciężka praca, wymagająca dużego zaangażowania, często 24 godziny na dobę.
To właśnie pasja doprowadziła nas do momentu, w którym mogliśmy uczestniczyć w wydarzeniach takich jak Mistrzostwa Świata i Europy w piłce nożnej w roku 2017 i 2019 oraz w jednym z najważniejszych turniejów golfowych w Polsce Grady Polish Open by Emerald w roku 2020.
Mieliśmy również zaszczyt być partnerem konferencji organizowanej na Zamku Królewskim w Warszawie pod tytułem Autentyzm, ochrona i zarządzanie. Dzisiaj na stałe doradzamy na ogrodach Zamku Królewskiego pod względem właściwej pielęgnacji trawników i ogrodów.
Chcemy dzielić się wiedzą i zarażać pasją kolejne pokolenia greenkeeperów i groundsmenów. Na naszych szkoleniach dla obiektów sportowych, pól golfowych, firm usługowych prezentujemy najnowsze rozwiązania z zakresu pielęgnacji muraw trawiastych. Przeprowadzamy audyty, doradzamy w inwestycjach związanych z budową stadionów piłkarskich i boisk. Każdego dnia poszukujemy odpowiedzi na pytanie, jak właściwie pielęgnować trawnik.
Nasz cel to szmaragdowy kolor, taki jak logo naszej firmy.
Podstawowym budulcem każdego ogrodu jest ziemia. Dlatego nasz spacer po królewskich ogrodach rozpoczniemy od zejścia pod ziemię. To tutaj, 4 metry pod ziemią, rozpoczyna się nasza 12-kilometrowa trasa nawadniająca ogrody. To również stąd sterujemy naszymi fontannami i oświetleniem. To była techniczna strona naszego ogrodu, a teraz wracamy na górę. Rabata kwietna to jedna z naszych największych atrakcji. 4 razy w sezonie zmieniamy jej wygląd, aby zawsze była piękna i świeża. Zabytkowy labirynt grabowy to serce naszego ogrodu. To na nim oparto ideę odtworzenia ogrodów dolnych, gdyż najstarsze drzewa przetrwały działania wojenne. Trawiasty wgłębnik w centralnej części naszego ogrodu to oddech dla kompozycji ogrodów dolnych. Świeża i zielona trawa przyciąga uwagę naszych zwiedzających, a trawnik wygląda świetnie w każdej porze roku. Ogrody zamkowe to także ostoja zwierzyny. Ptaki i drobne zwierzęta futerkowe to nasi stali bywalcy. Obecnie znajdujemy się w Boskiecie Południowym, który nie przetrwał działań wojennych i został w całości odtworzony. Warto tu także zajrzeć przez wzgląd na fantastyczną rzeźbę smoczycy, która od niedawna gości w naszych ogrodach. Królewskie Ogrody to niepowtarzalne miejsce na mapie Warszawy, idealne do odpoczynku i relaksu.